Let's hop in. Edward, it's great to meet you, sir. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
You got it.
So before we get into your good work with leadership and helping people get to a better place, I want to know this. 5, 6 years ago, this pandemic changed our worlds, changed leadership, changed the way that we live and do business. How did you get through that era, and how did it refine your approach as to what you're doing today?
Well, comically, Joe, I had just as we were entering 2020, I had set up a new methodology and framework for leading. I was finishing a book, and I spent the 3 months leading into the pandemic when none of us knew it was happening. Some of us had the sniffles already, at getting ready to launch this book. And so on May 1, despite this being in the throes of the pandemic, I launched my book, From Expert to Executive, Mastering the SOPs of Leading. So what I ended up doing is trying to figure out how the heck do you launch a book when the world is shut down?
Yep.
How do you leverage a newly licensed framework and methodology across several sites of in-person training that were done, all with a world that is shut down, doing things that people traditionally didn't do, like 6 month leadership courses with schools of people from companies like Epson North America. And how do you do that and do it remotely suddenly in a way that is engaging and works, and incidentally sells books and gets your word out there. So that, for me, that's what the pandemic was about, was scrambling to figure out how I could make all of that work.
Well, and I think it refined a lot of people's approaches to life, which probably chiseled the idea of leadership, what we expect out of leaders, whether it's from government officials or it's from companies, whether they went all remote or halfway. How much of living through that era refined kind of the overall approach you think to leadership and the way that people were going to do it from there on out?
Well, I think interestingly, it really disrupted a lot of behavior patterns, the pandemic, for good. And I don't mean for the better. I mean for good, as in forever. I'll give you an example. Prior to the pandemic, I was driving 100 miles minimum a day, so much that I had a customized Sprinter van with, cappuccino machine, meeting space, everything, that I was driving around to customer sites. Sometimes so that I could do private work in between sessions when I was either in LA or San Diego or Orange County for the day, and can't do my kind of work in a Starbucks. But also, some of my clients are high-level executives that have fish bowls, and frankly, they didn't want to get super vulnerable with a coach while their team watched, through the windows. And so, and others, very thin walls, and didn't want to have sensitive discussions about executive stakeholders or peers in an environment where they might overhear and you could incidentally harm relationships. So the point being, I was highly mobile every single day. Every client expected me to be there in person. Uh, Post pandemic, that is not the expectation. 90% of my work is not even with people I could drive to anymore. And all of my clients that are local say, don't bother coming in, because it's just a hassle for both of us. We can maximize my time if we just turn on the screen and talk. And of course, you have all the fears of that kind of thing going in. Does that hurt the client rapport and relationships, etc.? But as it turns out, we've all significantly adjusted our expectations. So that's how it changed me. But if I think about how it changed my clients, they've also had to regiment how they do that for their clients, their employees, right? They're all leaders, and the people that they are serving is their employees. And they've had to figure out, how do I engage any remote employees that I have? But also, how did those lessons where I had to work much harder, right? For thousands of years, leadership was highly correlated to proximity, right?
Yep.
I will drive culture. I will assess performance. I will do all those things by virtue of being in proximity to you. And we took that gift of proximity, of close proximity, away, and we had to start to develop new ways to generate community, to generate rapport, to look at the work. One of the great things that it is driven into a lot of people's operating models, even as they've returned now to the office, is the idea of process data. I'm a process improvement expert at heart, and what that means to me is if you only have outcomes data, if someone asks you to improve the outcome, you have no data about how you're getting that outcome, which means you can't improve it.
Yeah.
And leaders who had no process data means also when we go remote, I have no idea what you're doing or how you're doing because I've not built a system that gives me visibility of our process and how it's doing. So now I just wait for outcomes to see. And right, so a lot of people scrambled to create operating models in their community of effort that provided that transparency and really that traction for process improvement. And what I see is a lot of them have now brought that back into an in-office return to work environment for the better and have really empowered themselves and their teams to do a lot more process improvement.
So you have a lot of titles. You're a mixologist, you're an executive coach, you're an author. There's all these things. But if you were to be put in front of a bunch of 12-year-olds at career day, and one of the kids wanted to know what you do for a living, how do you synthesize all of that and explain it?
Well, I do have a lot of hats, and some of those hats, don't naturally converge into they're separate hats because they are separate.
Yeah.
But the core thing that I do outside of the mixology, which is something that nobody pays me for, that's just something I spend a terrific amount of money on because as soon as you get good at it, you find out you have way more friends than you thought that stop by way more frequently than they ever did before. But if I focus on what the core part of what I do is I help others cultivate communities of effort. And I think that's the purpose of leadership. Leadership is fundamentally a process of social organization that humans use when they embrace goals they can't achieve alone.
Yeah.
So if I can do it alone, I don't need leadership.
Yeah.
But if I can't do it alone and I require a community of effort, so people who are willing, capable, and it's a sustainable community, at least long enough for the goal, but likely long enough to achieve multiple goals, then I need leadership. I need this capability to cultivate a community of effort. Now, the difficult thing about leadership is that it is so easy. The objective that inspires us, right? For those of you who can see me and not just hear me, I've got my hand up in the sky like it's the moon. It's what's driving me. It's my moonshot goal, and I need a community of effort to get there. What happens to many leaders is they remain, because they're experts in what they do, they remain hyper focused on the work it takes to get there, the objective itself, and they forget to be hyper focused on their job as a leader, which is to create the capacity to get there, to create the community of effort. Because remember, the reason you need leadership is because you've embraced an objective you can't achieve alone. So the purpose of the leading is not the primary purpose is not goal attainment itself. It's the community of effort that is capable of getting to the goal. It's willing, the community of effort is willing, or it's not leadership. You're compelling or forcing or dictating. And it's got to be capable. And if you don't also build it sustainably, then they don't remain willing and capable. And so to get back to you asked the question about what do I tell a 12-year-old is I really do focus on that community of effort. And it's not even 12-year-olds. I have a 9-year-old precocious, hyper intelligent son, and we talk about that all the time. And to the fact that it's a joke, but in the family, as we talk about, you need a community of effort, don't you? You can't do that alone. So how do you influence mom and dad or your friends to play this game or do this thing? Because it's not something you can, if you can do it alone, go do it. You don't need a social system. But if you do need a social system, you got to figure out how to structure, operate, and perfect it.
So were you when you were at that precocious 12-year-old place in your life, what did you want to be when you grew up? What was your dream job?
Well, I would say the secret to me, when people ask, what do you think is your personal secret, is I always did have a dream. I always had a goal. Now, I would tell you, it laughably changed radically throughout my life. And I think that's the story of most adults. It's rare that we really do what that 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old version of us dreamed.
Yeah.
But for me at that age, I wanted to be, I had a pretty specific dream. I wanted to be in the military for 20 years and then retire relatively young or somewhere between a year like 15 and 20, move into federal law enforcement, and then retire and write books. And that was my vision for myself. And it was a super great vision for me. I was very excited about it. And the reason I say the secret was the vision is I made so many choices based on what was right for that vision. And when I embraced a radically different vision, it turned out so much of what I was already doing was still right for me because I had a vision of myself as a smart, professional, intelligent person that was not in trouble, that was on so there was so much the same. The big things were all the same. What was different is I changed my major. I was, a Marine at 17. Started going to Penn State at the same time I was in the reserves. So I did 6 months of full-time training, and then was released into the wilds of Penn State. And at first I was studying force science. Then I changed to criminal justice, and then I came back from Cuba after being activated and sent there, and changed to philosophy of all things. And that's how I finished out my degree, was really contemplating the rest of my life is what did I want to do? And that was a time of radical change for me. But like I said, turned out 4-year degree was still helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Turn,
Yeah.
turned out doing military service at the same time was immensely helpful when I got into a workforce that, sure, I had a degree that didn't give me a lot of credibility, but I sure had some life experience that did. And so as I faced a workforce full of baby boomers who didn't much like Gen Xers or anyone younger than them, I had credibility with them, which of course is a very similar story to the Gen Z and millennials that today outnumber the rest of us in the workforce, but are looked down upon by the rest of us. So they're fighting a very similar battle, so to speak, that those Gen Xers like myself, fought when we entered the workforce, and the baby boomers looked down upon us with very little credibility, didn't like our work habits, didn't like how we wanted to be a part of every discussion, etc.
So, speaking of leadership, who was that leader that you saw, whether consciously or subconsciously, that infused the way that you teach and help shape leaders?
Well, I'll say that the absolute first exposure I had to any kind of leadership professional was through my stepdad, who was listening to Stephen Covey's Seven Habits. So if you think, I'm 51 years old. So if you think about back in the 90s and late 80s, some of his content was really on fire and remains relevant today, and in fact has left its mark on me. If you think my big thing is leadership SOPs and his big thing was habits, it might be a little bit of a connection there, right?
Yeah.
But I would say that the real leaders who impacted me was not one person. I was definitely rough around the edges, had a big brain, and at many different times in my career thought I had learned and knew everything I needed to know, right? Like many of us, and had leaders who were willing to lift me up, give me chances, but also humble me in kind ways that allowed me to continue to stretch and grow and understand that I wasn't fully formed. I had lots to learn. And, that goes from my very first professional boss, Janet Wall, all the way to what was at the time her boss and became my boss also, Robert Moran, and just a long line of fantastic leaders who took an interest in me beyond just my work, beyond just somebody they needed to manage, but somebody whose life they're still involved in today. In fact, almost every leader I ever reported to has remained, close contact into their retirement years. And that has been a real joy. And the thing I know is it's a gift because the clients I work with, many of them are scrambling in their organizations to find just one person that they could say is taking that kind of interest in me. And that's something that um, really tugs at me is we all need those people in our lives, people that can both lift us up and at the same time sharpen us, at the same time provide those humbling experiences in a very caring way, because that's the only way we can truly process them. Otherwise, it's just trauma when somebody does that.
Yeah.
And so it's got to be done by somebody you're convinced really cares about you as a human. And then it's one of the most powerful experiences we can have.
So, from expert to executive is obviously you dispensing wisdom that people can grab onto, but it's fictitious. Talk to me a little bit about what your approach was and what you like, what you really want the reader to get out of this book.
Sure. Well, what I want the reader to get out of the book is in the first 20 pages, and it'll take us just a few seconds really to cover it. It's inculcating it, really integrating it into your life. That's the difficult part, and that's why the story. So the 10 chapters reinforce the first 20 pages in the introduction.
Yeah.
And really, the concept and the title comes not from a story about me going from expert to executive, but really, what is that natural journey that a leader takes, right? Their expertise buys a ticket to a journey that does not require that expertise anymore often, or very little, and the further you go, the less it does. So, in fact, the first line in the introduction is, every step on the journey from expert to executive leads away from your craft. So away from that thing that you've spent thousands of minutes, tens of, and hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of your life on. As you gain mastery over that, people adjust your trajectory away from that expertise and toward this new craft called leadership, which is all about this community, essentially community building, right? Cultivating the community of effort you need. And so the story itself, which, as you mentioned, is fictitious as it can be, right? All of the characters are amalgamations of real humans that I've encountered in my life, real situations. In fact, one of the greatest compliments I often get is people who are retired have frequently said they experienced like almost PTSD moments of reading the book, saying that I felt like I was back in it, like I was really back at work, like it was
Uh-huh.
real stuff that you were talking about that I've seen. And many of them said, by the way, you were talking about Bob, weren't you? You were definitely talking about Bob. And so of course nobody is one person in the book. But the idea of all of this that I told you I'd unwrap in a few seconds and then promptly didn't is that the purpose, as I've already said, of leading is to cultivate a community of effort, full stop. And what does that mean then? Is that if we need that community of effort, if it has to exist, then we need to create it. We need to run it like it's been created in order to see where it needs or how it needs to be improved. And so for me, I translate that into it needs to be structured, it needs to be operated, and it needs to be perfected. And I look at those three domains of structuring, operating, and perfecting, and what do they really mean to design, to engage, and to continuously improve a human system. And that breaks down into 16 other dimensions that I focus on and help leaders do the work of leading, which we really ignore in my community as we teach other leaders. And I think it's why we have globally CEOs that don't think their leaders are leading, leaders who don't think their leaders are leading, and employees who think none of them are doing a good job, and Gen Z and millennials who say, don't even give me the job, right? Like we have scalable human enterprises under threat because we don't focus on that work of leading. So we got the purpose of leading, cultivating communities of effort, the work of leading, structuring, operating, and perfecting those communities of effort. And then the last icing on the cake is the process of leading. And that is developing your standard operating procedures for structuring, operating, and perfecting communities of effort. So if you're really thinking about that leadership SOPs thing I threw out before, that's really a mnemonic double entendre, right? Helping you remember both the process of leading, that I have to develop standard operating procedures to do the work, which is to structure, operate, and perfect, also SOP. So really trying to, none of this is any good if you can't remember it. And I come from, as a healthcare executive and a Marine, and there's nothing more in common in those two professions than, except for two things. One is a paramilitary or an actual military reporting structure, and two, acronyms. We love them.
Yeah.
We love our acronyms, and so it should be no shock to anyone that someone who's come from those two backgrounds has, a methodology and framework that is steeped in mnemonics. And then also what my friends will tell you is I can't remember anything. So if I don't use mnemonics, then I'm not going to cover it all and remember it each time.
So a lot, speaking of developing, I'm going to hone in on that word. You're developing an app that's helping clients. Talk to me a little bit about this app. How is it going to back up what you're doing and your overall approach to getting people to that ideal place?
Well, it's absolutely comedic that for several years I've been out there saying, look, we need to treat leadership like a process. Therefore, the best way to develop your leadership is not in a classroom. It's in the classroom of life. It's in the doing. So you've got to define it, do it, measure it, analyze it, and improve it. Right? That's just the basics of process improvement applied to leadership because it too is a process. Except I had no tool for them to do it. What I would do is you probably see behind me, there's kind of a magazine styled book there, and that was what I was giving people as paper to write down your SOPs and have your playbook. But I wasn't giving them a real tool, a digital tool that was actually helpful for them to write it down, right? It just felt like busy work. Like I can remember my own habits, my own SOPs, but what we're giving people now is an ability to define their system of leading, to develop a playbook, and then activate it, right? Be guided through it so they can match their aspiration with their perspiration each and every time and across multiple teams and share it. So they also have the ability to contribute their SOPs to our crowdsourced library, which means a new leader can come onto the app, take a look at the way other people do it, and either go create their own with that in their head or adopt it and bring it right into their playbook and start adjusting things to make it good for their context. Or they can use our AI to help them establish one. And in another couple weeks, you're going to be able to kind of pull the lever and have that AI dump a draft SOP based on that discussion you've had with it right into your playbook and activate it. And of course, leaders and trainers can use this to extend their partners. So my firm, included with other coaches and trainers, I'm not trying to edge out and be the smartest guy on this platform, can also use this to extend their partnership all the way to the moment of execution. And of course, it will allow organizations to see and drive leadership behavior like no other tool has.
So when you look at the arc of your career beyond family and kids and everything that you're doing in your personal life, when you look at your professional life, what are you the proudest of?
I'll tell you in a couple of years. This is my life's work right now, is trying to get this platform alive and well for unsupported leaders in the hands of other trainers and coaches and inculcated and integrated into the systems within large organizations where simply we have massive amounts of communities that are not being led because we focus on all these interpersonal skills and styles when it comes to leadership, which means that we're not training the leaders about the actual leading. This would be akin to teaching a soccer player sportsmanship instead of what their role is on the field and how to score. Does sportsmanship help? Will it make them a better player, both within their team and in their relationships with competitors? Heck yeah, it will. But if we don't teach them what their role is and how to score and how to interact with the other roles on the team, we've missed the boat. And that's what we're doing when we teach leadership, uh, interpersonal skills and styles and all that stuff is the icing on the cake. That's what we interpersonally bring to the picture. But that stuff's just citizenship, really. That's membership, not leadership.
Yeah.
That's not the work of leading.
So everyone has a perception of you, Edward. Family, friends, clients, everyone around you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Great question. I think that I'm really just that good thought partner that has thinks systemically. And so I've seen a lot of patterns unfold across, I've been talking a lot about my coaching work, but I also do a terrific amount of organizational design work where I really help organizations play three-dimensional chess when they embrace new strategies and they have to kind of think differently about how they deploy their troops on the battlefield of business, right? Uh, and so, because I've seen all those patterns unfold through all this change, it's often mistaken for wisdom or even creativity in the moment, or that I know a lot about every type of business. And what it is I know a lot about communities of effort. I know a lot about the patterns of dysfunction and function that humans get into. And so it makes me a cool thought partner. And so I'll say that's how I'd like to think about myself ultimately, is just someone that's great to be in a conversation with, whether that conversation is about your favorite cocktail and what is a shrub, or if the conversation is about particularly sticky transformation I'm trying to drive at work, but instead I'm getting run over. I'm getting run over by my peers or a particularly difficult executive stakeholder.
So if anybody is ready for the next step, they want more, they want to ask questions, reach out, get the app, buy the book, any of the good business, hire you, how do they do that?
Well, look, you're going to find from expert to executive on Amazon. You can always reach out to me on my own platform now. It's available for free in the Apple and Google Play stores. Leadership SOPs app. That's leadership with SOPs attached to it. You're going to find us faster if you make that one word and not spread it into two. And you, of course, can find me on LinkedIn. You can follow, and engage me directly on LinkedIn. Uh, I'm not hard. I'm not hard to find. So if they want to find me, they just look up Ed Tyson. I'll pop up and be smiling at you in your Google return.
I love it. Final question. If you can meet one leader alive today that you admire, that you think top down does it the right way, hang out, talk to them, have a lunch that might help you on your journey, who would you love to hang out with a little bit?
Cool question. Um, But here's I can't answer it. And the reason I
Right.
can't answer is I also can't tell you what's my favorite color. We're humans are imperfect. There's some really interesting stuff going on right now at Amazon, and I do talk to a lot of people there. But I don't talk, of course, to Bezos, who's stepped away, or Andy there. But that's an organization that the more I see of it, the more I see how it's struggling under the weight and succeeding, by the way. I mean, in ways that no modern or historical company has. But they're also, as a result, dealing with some really complex issues. So I would say, probably some leaders there and understanding better how they're grappling with both the cultural and the technological and the business process challenges.
Yeah.
That's a cool conversation to have because the scale is like nothing
Yeah.
the planet has ever seen
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
Supersedes
100%.
governments, and I mean, it's just
Crazy.
it's amazing. And so it's hard as somebody that does what I do, it's hard not to see the complexity in that and be super interested, not because it's perfect, and not because it's fully imperfect, but because it is. It's jam-packed with a lot of humans trying to add value. And that's where all the calamity starts.
On a cellular level, yesterday I ordered a microphone in the morning, and I thought it would take a day or two to get there. And all of a sudden, the dogs are barking at 9 o'clock. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, man, that dot started here in the morning at like 8 in the morning in Kansas City and made its way all the way zigzagged. And there's somebody laying it on my porch at 9 o'clock. That's crazy. That's something in the 90s my friends and I used to joke around about. It's going to get to a point where you can sit in your armchair and there's going to be little like bank teller tunnels and you can just dial in a Whopper and it'll just arrive at your seat. And it's kind of like that. It's weird,
Yeah. Except
man.
for I think it's going to come the other way. It's going to
Yeah,
come.
right. It should. Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Did it roll up in a Rivian van, an electric van, or
Uh-huh.
not?
Yeah, it made that little weird sound that little like member in the Star Wars band came up and made it
Yeah.
sound and
Good friend of mine is the chief design officer of Rivian, and one day he was pulled into my driveway. So we had our Rivian in the garage, his Rivian in the driveway, and up comes the Amazon van. So we basically had every vehicle he had designed that was commercially available, of course, all at once, and it was kind of one of those amazing convergence. I'm looking at him
that's it.
going, do you see what's happening right now? Do you
Uh-huh.
see what
The universe dumped right there in your lap at one point. That's awesome. Totally awesome. Well, I'm going to put all these links in the show notes. What an illuminating conversation. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today. Best of luck and have a great 2026. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe, and thanks to your listeners. I hope they got some value out of our discussion today.
I have no doubt. Thank you so much.